Hi, I'm Kim Taylor, and this is another edition of On the Couch for the Viewpoint. Sister Andrea, you've had a remarkable career. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
First, you live in Norfolk at the monastery, but you've spent almost 60 years in Africa as a teacher, right?
Well, take off 20 years when I worked in a hospital.
And then you grew up in Pierce, Nebraska?
In Pierce, on a farm.
Would you have thought that you would have spent that much time in Africa?
I never thought. When I entered the convent, entered high school 47, and I was in 51, I became a sister. I thought I would never leave Nebraska. I never asked to go to the mission, but they asked me to go to Tanganyika, it was called that time, to be in a teacher training college to teach English and music. So that was new to me. I didn't expect that. So.
Well, tell us a little bit about your time in Africa.
So I got there in the early 1960, and first of all, they didn't put me right into teacher training. I should get used to. I learned the language, and I learned the people and the culture and the place. So they put me to teach for 1 year in the grade school. And there were just girls there. It was middle school. And they didn't give me 8th grade because there were some poor students there, and they said I would feel that they failed because of me. So they gave me 7th grade. Until now, after all these years, a couple of them I still have contact with. That was a very good class, and that was 7th graders. They said at that time the girls were so afraid of being educated, it just wasn't done. Girls weren't being taught, and so some of them would jump over the wall of the boarding place before the final exams at the end of 8th grade. But that never, when I was there, it never happened anymore. That part was gone.
Were they scared of
They were
advancing?
scared of being, they were afraid of education. They studied hard, but it was only the boys who were educated always. If there anybody to be educated, it was the boys who were chosen in the family. And these were girls.
And so you were sent over there really to teach them English, right?
English and music. Now Africans were teaching me music. They have their own culture, yes.
So you learned Swahili when you were there, and do you speak that well?
I learned Swahili, and I wanted to know it very well because, not just kitchen Swahili, because I would be teaching in schools, and if the kids make mistakes in English, I should be able to go back why they made that mistake. You get your compound tenses. When I came, he had been here already. How do you say that in Swahili? I needed to know all those things, so I took a book, and whenever free time I studied it.
So how do you say that in Swahili?
Nilipofika walikuwa wamekwishaondoka.
Do you speak other languages?
I was the only American in the whole place. So the other sisters and the priests and brothers, everybody was German or Swiss. So they knew English, some didn't. But those who know English would talk to me in English. And in school, of course, when I was teaching a while in high school and when I was in this teacher training, they all knew English. And that was supposed to be, anything past 8th grade is supposed to be in English in Tanzania.
Wow.
And that's very difficult. And so we were teaching these teacher trainees for 2 years to be able to also to teach English in grade school. And we would add on their teaching certificate, permission to teach English. And during their vacation time, we would take in those who were teachers already, older people, some were older than me, I was 26 when I went there. To teach them English, you give a couple of weeks of refresher course so that they could get put on their certificate, permission to teach English. And that's what they wanted to do. English was a good subject to teach because it's very important in Tanzania. Yes.
So you've taught all grade levels, right?
Yeah, not out there. Here, before I went away, before 1960, I was teaching. Like I said, I was 26 when I left. I was teaching in Wayne and Madison, and that was up to 4th grade. And going out there, our teacher trainees, afterwards we changed that school and made it co-education with the boys' high school. And there I was teaching in high school the different classes.
Did you have a favorite age to teach?
No, even the first year is good, freshman, sophomore, They all were very eager to learn. And as you get higher up in the juniors and seniors, it was much easier because they could get the book and study on their own. And they were so eager to learn. They wanted you to give them exams. They wanted you to mark their exams, to have them redo it. And the teachers who didn't do that, the students complained about that.
I don't think you're going to find that here very
That
often.
was so wonderful to teach there, yes. So those were good years.
So as a teacher in Africa, you have seen children probably with great needs, probably came from poor villages or communities. How did you help them as they were in the schools?
Yeah, in the school, for example, I knew they didn't have a big diet when they were home. They just had their porridge with beans, and trying to teach them to get other things in there. And when they were feeding their little brothers or sisters beans, said that just goes straight through them. You got to mash them and mix it in with their porridge. So that was all simple things like that. And then, of course, hygiene, and yeah, we didn't go into their villages, but we did see their homes. And their toilets, of course, were just a hole in the ground with a piece of wood on top and some kind of made of leaves, coconut palms, as to make it a little bit enclosure. That's what they were used to. So when we had flushing toilets, that was incomprehensible. Yeah.
And when they came to the schools, those were already buildings that were built, and the children came to you guys?
They were built already before I ever got out there. See, I only came in 1960. And they came out there way before even the... Tanzania was the very first place where our people went in 1886. And so when I came in 1960, they had already the Germans. The Germans are good builders and very thorough, and they did what they could. And so we had nice places too, and we had cement floors, of course, not anything else very fancy, but a cement floor was great, because the people at home, they had just dirt floors, and to clean it you would take some water and sprinkle to get the dust down. And like this, that's what they were used to.
Yeah.
So we had to get them to clean in school. It was something new to them. Yeah, but they learned. These were students, and they had good intelligence. Yes.
So you taught many years, but there was a time frame that you weren't teaching, and what did you get to do during that time?
At one time when I was teaching, and they asked me to go to this, they needed an administrator for a week or 10 days in the hospital. When I said I don't know anything about hospital, I mean I'd gone to a hospital, but not to be administrator. And they said, well, it's just a week or 10 days. So I said, oh, okay, I'll sit there and pretend, you know. And it turned out that Sister was giving me work, and I said, but I can't do this work. This is giving out, we cooked for all the patients. And if you're giving me this food to measure out every day, don't do that, because I'll be gone in a week. She just kept giving me more work and more work. And I stayed there 20 years. And I learned on the job, and we had different meetings. We would go to the capital, Dar es Salaam. I could talk to other administrators, the doctors. We had very good doctors there, our own sisters. There were at one time 3 medical doctors, our own sisters, in our school where I was teaching, and in that hospital. So that was good. And after the 20 years were over, 19 and a half years, I was told I should go now to the big city, Mtwara, and start a high school for African sisters who had never had a chance to go to high school. Mm-hmm. They were out in the mission stations in the parishes, just had grade school. And they were feeling so behind their students who now were starting to have high school, even if they failed. They squeaked through or hardly passed, but it didn't matter. They had a certificate in their hot little fist, and so they had passed. So he said the bishop wanted me to start a school, not me alone. We had a Philippine sister and an African sister, and a man who was a teacher, to start that school for sisters. And I said, look, I've been out 20 years now. I don't know what the education system. They didn't care. I just had to go ahead and do it. Most of my life is that way. Do this, and I went and did it. Now do that, go to Africa. So I went. I said, well, if it really is too bad, I could come back. But I liked it when I got out there from the start. Yeah. So it's nice working with those people, and they are very friendly. Really good to get along with.
And so now you're back here in Norfolk?
Now I'm back in Norfolk, yes. In last year I came back. 2015 I came back. And trying to get used to American life.
Yeah.
Throwaway culture. We saved everything, you know, the plastic cups, and we saved it. And people were so happy to take it home. And if there was some kind of a container, a real complicated machine in there, and I would give that to a lady who has a little boy for a present. And at once it became a car, you know, brrr, they go like this. You wonder, it's just a plastic thing, which you hear, they toss it, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about your history of
just so many
travels?
things. Well, sometimes we had animals. Once there was an elephant that strayed into our mission yard. In where the hospital was, there was a hippopotamus.
Oh my goodness.
People were saying, this hippo is eating our crops during the night. In the day he's in the river that went by, and in the night he would go out and eat their crops. So they had to call a game warden and kill it. So I have lovely photos of that one with the mouth wide open. But so those were interesting. And then we went to sometimes up there by Dar es Salaam, go west is Mikumi National Park, and there's every kind of animal there. Elephants and giraffes and warthogs and many little gazelles, dik-dik, yeah. So that was all very interesting, seeing all of that too.
Yes.
That was besides, it's not a part of school, but except part of my education.
Right. So
Yeah.
during your time there, you must have experienced some types of civil wars or things that have changed over the 60 years from when you started there to now that you've come back. Do you have anything you'd like to say about those
For one
changes?
thing, we never had a war, and there never was civil war, and it was always peaceful, and I never felt endangered. People often ask me, did you feel worried? Were you in danger? And I said, never. We had a very good president. You maybe heard of Julius Nyerere. He got independence from Britain. Not a shot was shot. He did all by diplomatically and by speaking to them and negotiating, and in the end they handed over the flag, and they raised it on top of Kilimanjaro, and everything was very peaceful. So we never had a war, except in Uganda was Idi Amin. You've heard about him. He wanted to take a piece of Tanzania, and that was a war. They sent soldiers and kicked him out, and he left then. But otherwise, no. Congo is always saying, why don't you help us? Come and send your soldiers. And he said, you fight your own wars. We are not going to fight wars for other countries. And they kept out of it. It was very peaceful the whole time. Now that the people, the way they live, of course there are people who still live like they did back in 60. But most of the huge changes in technology and in what we would say civilization, they were, when I went out there, even in our main mission, we didn't have a telephone. So you have to go to another large city or go to Dar es Salaam. So we didn't have a phone. Nowadays, everybody has a cell phone, even the Africans. So many, they have got their cell phones. And I could hardly believe it at first, but that took years. That was until 20, 30 years. But otherwise, many things have changed. Cars. There was no African even knew how to drive a car. The bishop needed a special car, not these Jeeps, which mostly Land Rovers. He needed a special sedan car because of his back. So he had an African driver, an older man, very good, careful, but no one else, and nobody had their own cars. I didn't say in between, the government moved me to a school in the middle of Tanzania, far from the south where I was, southeast, and I was there for 14 months. And I was staying with some sisters who had a maternity home. And I could see people driving up in their cars, and those cars belonged to them. They were not taxis. This changed also my own idea. Africans can learn modern technology also. And now eventually south, my own former students and people have got their cars. It's not so easy and they're not good roads, but much better roads than when I first came, of course. And a lot of highways, paved roads. Of course, when my mother came to visit once and she wanted to write her notes, we were on a highway. Impossible to write. This was a nice highway. I said, it's really a very good road. Oh, but she couldn't write it. She had to stop. When we stopped, she could write in her diary. Yes.
So, in Tanzania, is that a good place for someone to go volunteer to help if they want to take a mission trip or something like that? Is that a good place to go?
This is true. Although they are very careful, you don't come into the country now if you take away a job of a citizen.
Oh, okay.
And it's not so easy to come in order to work. Mission, yes. For if you come in as a missionary, no problem. On your application, you write, what's your work? Missionary. Okay. If I'm a teacher or a nurse or a doctor, don't say that. Just say missionary. Because if you say a doctor or a teacher, you have a contract. And then you have to go. And we don't do that. We don't just come in and go out after a couple of years.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you ever wish to go back there again?
Well, I would like very much to, but and I know it's not going to happen, so I do keep up contact with a number of them with email, and once in a while I can phone. I have a phone card, which is cheaper, and I can phone to, but you know we are 8 or 9, depending on the year, the time of the year, hours difference.
Oh, yeah.
So after a while when we got Skype, and my family, my brothers and sisters and cousins, were talking on Skype, so sometimes it's 8 hours difference and sometimes 9. It's hard to phone, but email works easy anytime, yeah. And then of course we chat away in Swahili. Yeah, yes.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to meet with us today and go over some of the things that you've got to experience.
Yes, this was very short. Thank you for being so patient.
No.
I didn't have everything written down what to say, so
You did great.
I tried to answer what you said.
Thank you.
Okay.